So, The Last of Us 2 has been out for about more than a month now, and I even questioned about making this video because, good God, it's been beaten the fuck up. The Last of Us 2 has been making headline after headline, good reviews and bad reviews, rant videos and praise videos, and it's just kind of getting old by now. We get it, no matter what your opinion about the game is. But I don't want to do that. I don't want to make a 10-minute video about what I think is good or bad about the game. I want to talk about how I think The Last of Us Part 2 could have been better in some aspects of the story to try and make it a bit more enjoyable for everyone. Because let's face it, no matter what you think about Part 2, it just wasn't as good as the first game. It's obvious where I stand on this game with the title of the video and what I said in the intro, but to those who love this game, I encourage you to try and listen to my opinion to get a new idea and try and compare it to the original. And if you don't like my take on it, no hard feelings, and don't be scared to let me know. And to those who dislike the story, the same goes for you as well, and I hope everyone enjoys the ride. But before we get into it, because this was such a hot topic, I'm going to just lay out what the game is, what I think of it as a whole briefly, just so you know where I stand on things. And I'm going to try and tweak and add things to the current build of the game, and not to try and change huge pieces of the story to take out some of the work Naughty Dog has done and spit on it. And here's a big ass spoiler warning, but I probably didn't have to do that because I'm really late with this video. Also, I had to play this game twice because I didn't record it on my first playthrough at all, and I put it on super easy and enabled all the cheat codes, so if you see that in the gameplay, don't roast me. So let's get right into it. So what is The Last of Us Part 2? The Last of Us 2 is a direct sequel to the first game, continuing the story of Joel and Ellie after the incident at the Firefly Hospital. But Joel's story ends pretty fast after being brutally killed by an unlikable character, Abby, while poor Ellie has to watch. Ellie searches for revenge looking for Abby in Seattle, but this is where the game flips you on your head and says, oh no, now you have to play as Abby and learn about her, because she's not just some no-faced villain. You see her have emotion, and she actually has a reasonable motive for killing Joel. So reasonable, in fact, that that's exactly what Ellie is doing in the game. The game forces you to walk in the shoes of someone you hate, and tries to teach you, of course, that revenge is bad, but also a lesson that mindless killing can have its consequences. That the people you kill have the same feelings, stories, motives, and that mindless killing is what you got in this situation, this cycle, and the only way to break it and to stop the pain is to not kill. And Ellie does that at the end of the game, having a perfect chance to kill Abby, but Ellie gets a flashback of Joel and chooses to spare Abby and allows her to escape. And that's just a brief rundown of the story and plot of the game, but... and this is where I'm going to talk about what I think of the game right now, and I'll keep it short because I said I didn't want to do this, bear with me. But notice how the story and the plot has nothing to do with the side characters, Dina, Jesse, Tommy, any of Abby's crew, or even Joel really, instead of the motive at the start and the reason at the end. Even running around getting one location to another, it has nothing to do with the plot or story, while in the game, that was the plot and story. In The Last of Us 1, walking from point A to point B was the plot, and the story was the fight for survival, meeting other characters for help, and growing the trust and relationship between Joel and Ellie along the way. But in Part 2, any of these conversations and characters has nothing to do with the story. And that's why I think most gamers, myself included, think a lot of this game is just a waste of time, because none of this really matters. And I think it causes players to feel somewhat bored and make them click the left stick up and L1 down to try and speed run through this game, hoping to hit a cutscene to make sense of what the hell is happening. I'm confident that if The Last of Us 2 was just the cutscenes and it was just a 10-hour long movie, it probably would have been somewhat good. But it's not. It's a video game. Key plot points shouldn't be spaced out by 2-hour long gameplay parts, especially if the gameplay has nothing to do with the plot and barely anything to do with the story. I could talk all day about this, but enough of that. Let's talk about what I would have changed to try and make The Last of Us 2 better. At the beginning of the game, there's little to nothing I would change. I love the intro of Joel confessing to Tommy what he's done. I love the little drama spout Ellie, Jesse, and Dina had. It makes sense for what horrors Ellie has been through at such an early age, and then to be thrown in a safe environment with others her age. It's obvious that she would get caught up in some teen drama and have some trouble with it, because it's just only natural. If anything, I would love to have seen more of Ellie and Jackson and have moved the museum scene and the dance scene to the beginning of the game to show the relationship of Joel and Ellie that we're familiar with, some Last of Us 1 vibes, and connect us more with Joel, and with the dance to show that Ellie, for as loudmouth and brash as she is, that she can be a little socially awkward in a crowd, but comfortable Dina can mellow her out and they can both have a moment together and share a kiss on the dance floor. This would have given more time to grow the relationship with Dina at Jackson, and also be a bigger shock when you learn that Dina was Jesse's ex the whole time, and you just got caught macking on homeboy's fly girl, but Jesse's cool with it because he's practicing the hit and pass. And an unpopular opinion here, but playing as Abby in the beginning parts leading up to kill Joel, I was cool with it. It definitely gave a bigger shock to Joel's death and makes the player feel a little responsible. The hardest part for me by far has to be Joel's death. An absolute icon in video games, beloved by all, and I think for a character this size, he did deserve a better send-off. In Joel's death, there was no recollection back to the first game at all. Ellie and Joel only really had one interaction, and we don't even know why Abby is killing Joel yet. You want to feel bad because this is one of your favorite characters in gaming, and you remember all the good moments you guys had in the first game, but the moments just happen too fast in the second, and there's no reference to the first game at all. Joel's death was treated a lot like Tessa's death in the first game, like he was just one of those characters that you liked, but don't really remember after too long. I can go on and on about how I would try to change things or reorder something, like maybe when Joel said, "Who are you?" it does the zebra flashback, but not to damage the overall structure of the storyline. The only thing I can think of is right before Abby hits the final blow on Joel, while Ellie is screaming for Joel to get up. Joel, delirious from multiple head wounds and no energy to get up at all, no matter how loud Ellie yells. All Joel can do is barely open his eyes and with his last breath utters the name, Sarah. That even after 20 years and all of the moments of the first game, building a strong relationship with Ellie and seeing her as a daughter figure and watching her grow the whole time, Joel never forgot about his little girl that was taken from him, and with his final thoughts and words, he chooses to think of her one last time, hoping to see her again. And after adding the museum scene before this one, I feel Joel's death would have hit a bit harder. Something so small could have been so deep to start the second game referencing what kicked off the whole tone for the franchise. And I'm sad that an opportunity like this was missed, and it's tough to see the old man go. Back at Jackson soon after Joel's death, the city and most importantly Ellie mourns the loss of Joel. And this is where I kind of had my biggest issues with the game. The conversation between Tommy and Ellie. Ellie is pent up in rage, wanting revenge, while Tommy is willing to let them go, and I think it should have been the other way around and flipped again when they're at the farm. Tommy at the beginning of the game should have had that same what a joke energy, while Ellie would act more like Tommy. The reason I would like this change is if Tommy set out on his own with no one's blessing and Maria almost gave no resistance for Ellie and Dina to go and gave them a horse as well, why could they not catch up to Tommy before they all arrived at Seattle from Wyoming? Although, someone you couldn't catch up to is a motivated Tommy, an angry Tommy, a you just killed my brother, prepare to be tortured for information and I won't bat an eye Tommy. And this would have made sense to Ellie's side as well. She couldn't catch up to Tommy until they got to Seattle. She knows that Joel would have wanted Ellie to be safe rather than be avenged. She'd be terrified at herself when she tortured Nora, feel remorse for killing Prego Girl, and it would have made sparing Abby make much more sense because it was not her fight to begin with. But the current mental state of Ellie in The Last of Us 2, that she's this gung-ho person looking for revenge, like, why does she have the nerve to cry and have a mental breakdown after beating up Nora? Like, Ellie, I'm gonna need you to tighten up. Joel and my man Tommy did the exact same thing, and you don't hear squat from them. It would have made much more sense if you didn't want to go in the first place. Speaking of the distance between Seattle and Wyoming, Where is it? They kind of made it seem like Seattle and Jackson were like a block away, and I think it was a missed opportunity to try and bring Ellie and Dina closer together because, let's face it, I get nothing in this game that tells me that they're in love. They had crushes on each other for a while if you read the journal, they kissed at the dance, they played snowball with kids, they have awkward small talk chatting to get to know each other, banged after smoking some moldy ass banyan, and then boom, we traveled about 700 miles on one horse with each other. But hey, did you know I was Jewish? I was really confused how they got to the I don't want to lose you phase so fast. And Ellie, you're literally doing this while talking to her, like you're scared of Dina. In Uncharted, it took Drake and Elena damn near 4 games to make their relationship work, with a lot of ups and downs, but you know that they're in love because they dug it out together and they're goddamn cute as hell while doing it.
My hero.
Oh no, you didn't do that. No, that's not funny.
But with Ellie and Dina, their connection just seemed fake, and I guess it really shows at the end when Dina just left. I just really wanted more to come out of their relationship, possibly a travel sequence and a campfire cutscene. Maybe she plays a guitar, because everyone knows guitar dudes get laid, but it's to show them really falling in love, connecting together, and merging to be the ultimate power couple known as Deli. There's a lesbian joke in there somewhere. So we're here. We're finally at the actual game for the biggest bulk. And this is where most of the gameplay is. And one thing everyone knows about this game is the gameplay is hot. Especially this semi-open world bit in the first chunk of the game. I was really hurt to not see more of this later down the line. And everyone knows the structure of the game. You play as Ellie for 3 Seattle days, and then you play as Abby for the same 3 days as a big meanwhile flashback. My only problem with this is the order of it all. I think the Naughty Dog team wanted it to be a big shock to be brought back to Abby, but to me it just hurts the narrative because right when you start playing as Abby on the first day, you forget what you did as Ellie on the first day because you already played through 20 hours of Ellie day 2 and 3. I think it would have benefited the pacing of the game if it just went Ellie day 1, Abby day 1, Ellie day 2, Abby day 2, Ellie 3, Abby 3. This would have given the player a better chance to try and compare the characters with each other because they're right there. And with most of the Seattle days, there's nothing I would really change because what I would have changed before tees up all of the actions the characters would have made in the game. All of Ellie's actions and emotions would have been valid, and Abby is actually well written. Her character is pretty strong and consistent. If anything, I wouldn't have Ellie sing Take On Me because all it reminded me of was the 80s mix radio station from Saints Row 2. But I still have one thing to change. One of the biggest things in the Seattle days, and that involves the character Jesse. Jesse was one of those characters I really hated to see how his character turned out. He was a close character to Ellie as a co-worker friend way. He has great banter. He was cool with Ellie hitting his ex, good looks by the way. He's the father to Dina's baby, but he's also capable of putting his foot down and having his own thoughts when he chooses to leave Ellie to help Tommy. That's a strong character. It really seems like they should have been a bit closer to the main cast, especially after he met his fate, and at least be mentioned once after his death, and the note talking about him doesn't count. The one thing I would add is in the conversation between Ellie and Jesse after he knew about Dina's pregnancy, Jesse will give his blessing to Ellie that he is fine with Deli raising his baby, but also just to let him see his kid every once in a while and maybe help out because, you know, my friend's problems are my problems. This would have shown his maturity that was present throughout the whole game, but also lead up to the incident with Abby. Jesse's death was quick and surprising, and it was just overshadowed with the duel with Ellie and Abby. The one thing I would have changed is to have Jesse as they barge through the door to help Tommy and see Abby with a gun, that Jesse would make a quick move to step in front of Ellie to shield her right before he was shot in the face. This would have made Jesse's death more sadder for the player, to learn that he was recently broken up with Dina, learning that he impregnated Dina, that he even snuck out of Jackson on his own just to help his friends, and gave Dina and Ellie his blessing and trust to raise his baby. Jesse, in this one act in protecting Ellie, he throws it all away. The chance to possibly find a new love, to see his home again, and to even see his future baby. He threw it all away to ensure the safety of Ellie. and this would have also added to Ellie's guilt, and I'll touch more on that later. So let's fast forward through this good god gameplay to the end part of the game, which is actually my favorite part, and that's not a joke, I'm serious. The pacing was way better, the locations were closer and more fast paced instead of let's spend 7 hours to get to the Ferris wheel twice, and the stealth section in the Rattler's base was really cool with the chained up clickers and etc etc. And the ending is probably the most controversial part of the game that most gamers had a problem with because Ellie spared Abby. And for me, with all the things I would have changed in the beginning parts, I would not change the ending at all, and here's why. In the beginning of the game, Ellie has to watch her father figure get brutally beaten right in front of her. And one of the biggest things dealing with the death or any tragedy of a loved one is thinking what you could have done differently. And this can include the I wish I was nicer and visited more, or what could I have done differently to prevent the death of my loved one. Ellie seeing that loved one being killed in front of her and having her time to mourn, thoughts in the mind of what ifs start to plague the mind. She could have thought maybe if I didn't bang Dina, I would have been closer to Joel to help, so Joel and Abby didn't have to take refuge in Abby's hideout. And this might have hurt even more after learning that Joel gave Ellie his blessing to date Dina. Back at Jackson, my version of Ellie wanted to stay home and mourn, but Tommy runs out looking for revenge. And Ellie, with being conflicted with what Tommy said, she feels bad for Tommy for losing his brother, and she is sent out to go look for him rather than looking for Abby. But a way to find Tommy is to also try and find Abby, because that's more of a form of a meeting point. She is horrified by her actions that she has to do in an attempt to find Tommy and Abby, while Tommy wouldn't be. This all doesn't work though, because after killing all of Abby's friends, Abby shows up and wipes the floor with everyone. With the death of Jesse and Tommy being shot in the face and Dina being beaten, the weight on Ellie's shoulders is heavier than ever. Ellie and Dina, with the aftermath of Seattle, they return back to the farm to raise JJ. Ellie, stricken with PTSD and the guilt of everything happening, she thinks that going out to kill Abby will make things right and leave her in peace. Tommy, a beaten, broken man, sees Ellie with the same thoughts he had in the beginning of the game and opposes Ellie for going through with it, because he learned the hard way that it doesn't work. Tommy lost an eye, the ability to walk properly, and lost Maria's sexy ass, and he doesn't want the same for Ellie. Ellie, motivated, breaks the heart of Dina and runs out to Santa Barbara to hunt down Abby. She finds Abby and has her final showdown with her. Ellie is now in the position to kill Abby, but in the act of drowning her, Ellie has a quick flashback of Joel. And Ellie realizes that this isn't what Joel would have wanted, and it's not her fight. And then she chooses to spare Abby, also knowing that she doesn't want to do this to Lev as Abby did to Ellie. Then when Ellie returns back to the farm, she finds that Dina packed up and left with JJ. Ellie, with 2 missing fingers, learns that she lost the ability to play the guitar, the one thing that could have reminded her of Joel. And the flashback of Joel where he tells her that no matter what, Ellie's safety is most important to him. And with that, Ellie is left to see what she has done. Because of her guilt for Joel, Tommy, Jesse, and Dina, she went against herself and came out with an L, losing them all. My version isn't a revenge story like the original, it's a guilt story. Some people stricken with guilt close up their walls and end up hurting others in the process, and this would have been a story of 3 people with a big amount of guilt trying to right what they did wrong, but learned that it's not their fight, and this is not what the lost one would have wanted, because a loved one's safety is most important, and that they didn't do anything wrong in the first place. The mind under trauma can be a dangerous place and make people do and act out of character that can end up hurting others in the process. This would have been a story about having something traumatic happen to you doesn't exempt you from consequences. Most people with a lot of guilt go down the route of self-damage. This could be substance abuse, isolation, or leaving alone to an unknown area in search of revenge. But it ends up not only hurting you, but most importantly to the people around you that love you, and could drive them away, or in a setting of a post-apocalyptic world, it may cost someone their life, and would leave you more hurt than before. That trying to escape guilt rather than fighting it head on can have its consequences. That it is better to fight the demons inside and not the demons out in the world. To use your time to remember the times that you had with the ones that were lost, because you can't remember while you're gone. With these changes, all of the moments and choices in the game kind of click together and make sense, and it makes the supporting characters more involved with the plot of the story, unlike the original that only involves Ellie and Abby, and not all these other people. And it'll also make having Abby as a playable character feel good too, because getting revenge as a way of dealing with her father's death and the guilt that she has gone through and the path that she has chosen to deal with it, it also has killed her friends. She's part of the story too. Jesus, if anyone's watching down this far, I thank you so much, and I hope you got something out of this, not only just for the game, but for real life as well. And I hope everyone has a good day, because damn, we went through some deep stuff, but don't let it get to you too hard. Find safety in numbers and hold your loved ones close. I hope everyone enjoyed, and that is how I would have tried to fix The Last of Us Part 2. Thank you. I didn't want to end on a sappy note. Look at me. I'm spinning around. I'm coming from the left. Maybe from the top. Oh, which way this time? Maybe from everywhere. Woo! Wow. Good God, I need help.